3 months into her job at Red Rock Ranch, Sarah had settled into a routine that felt more natural than anything she had ever experienced. She woke before dawn each morning, pulled on her work clothes, and headed down to the barn where the horses nickered their greetings. The physical work had strengthened her body, and the regular schedule had brought a sense of stability to her life that she had never known before. But the marriage question hung over everything like a persistent cloud. Jake had been true to his word about not pressuring her for a decision, but Sarah was acutely aware that her 6-month deadline was approaching fast. She had gotten to know him better during their daily work together, and what she had learned only made the decision more complicated. Jake Morrison was nothing like what she had expected when she first heard his proposition. He was patient with both animals and people, generous with his praise when workers did well, and the first to jump in when anyone needed help with a difficult task. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged during quiet moments, and he genuinely cared about the welfare of everyone on his ranch. Sarah had also observed how he interacted with women. When the veterinarian came to check on the pregnant Mares, Jake treated Dr. Patricia Coleman with the same professional respect he showed to the male ranch hands. When Maria's granddaughter visited for a week during her school vacation, Jake was appropriately avuncular, helping with her homework and teaching her to ride without any hint of inappropriate behavior. "You've been watching him," Maria observed one afternoon as they prepared lunch together in the main house kitchen. "Trying to figure out if he's the kind of man you could trust with your future." Sarah looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, startled by Maria's directness. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you watch him," Maria said with a smile. "What have you concluded?" "That he's a better man than I expected," Sarah admitted. "But that doesn't necessarily mean we could have a successful marriage." "What does successful marriage mean to you?" It was a question Sarah had been asking herself for weeks. "I used to think it meant finding someone who made me feel like I was in a romantic movie. Now I'm not sure that's realistic or even desirable." Maria nodded thoughtfully as she stirred a pot of soup on the stove. "I'd been married for 42 years, Sarah. The butterflies and passion are wonderful when they last, but they're not what gets you through the difficult times. Respect, trust, and shared goals are what make a marriage work for the long term." "But what about love? Surely that has to be part of it." "Love comes in many forms," Maria said. "There's the exciting love you feel at the beginning of a relationship, but there's also the deep affection that grows between two people who build a life together. Sometimes the second kind is stronger and more lasting than the first." Sarah considered this as she continued chopping vegetables. "Do you think Jake could ever feel that kind of affection for me?" "I think he already does," Maria said quietly. "He's different when you're around. More relaxed, more willing to laugh. He started taking Sundays off again, something he hadn't done since his father died." This was news to Sarah. "Really?" "Really. And I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. There's fondness there, and respect. That's a good foundation for something deeper." That evening, Sarah found herself paying closer attention to Jake's behavior around her. During dinner with the ranch hands, she noticed that he did seem more at ease, joining in the good-natured teasing and sharing stories about his childhood on the ranch. When Carlos made a joke about Sarah's improvement with the horses, Jake's smile was warm and proud. Later, as they finished the evening chores together, Jake brought up a subject they had been avoiding. "We should probably talk about where things stand," he said as they walked back from checking on the pregnant Mars. "I know the 6-month deadline is getting closer." Sarah's stomach tightened with nervousness, but she nodded. "I've been thinking about it constantly. And I don't have a clear answer yet. This situation is so far outside anything I ever imagined for my life that I don't have a good framework for making the decision." Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. "Let me ask you this, are you happy here?" The question was simpler than Sarah had expected. "Yes. Happier than I've been in years." "Do you think you could see yourself staying here permanently, even if marriage wasn't part of the equation?" "Yes, I think I could." "Do you trust me? Not just as your boss, but as a person?" Sarah looked into his blue eyes and realized that she did trust him, completely. Yes. Then, maybe we're overthinking this, Jake said gently. We get along well, we work well together, and we both want the same things for this ranch. Maybe that's enough to build something good on. But what if we get married and then realize we're not compatible in other ways? What if we don't get married and spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been? Jake countered. There are no guarantees in life, Sarah. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. They had reached the main house, and Jake stopped on the front porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. I need to tell you something, he said. This arrangement started as a practical solution to my inheritance problem, but it's become more than that for me. Sarah's heart began beating faster. What do you mean? I mean that I've come to care about you as more than just a potential business partner. I enjoy your company, I respect your work ethic, and I find myself looking forward to our conversations at the end of each day. If we got married, it wouldn't just be a legal formality for me. The honesty in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. I care about you too, she admitted. More than I expected to when this all started. Jake stepped closer to her. Then, maybe we should stop overthinking this and trust our instincts. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to take a chance on us, Jake said. To believe that what we have now could grow into something even better over time. Sarah looked around at the ranch that had become her home, thought about the work that had given her purpose, and considered the man standing in front of her who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. The decision that had seemed impossible 3 months ago suddenly felt clear. Yes, she said quietly. I'll marry you. Jake's face broke into a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. Really? Really? But I have some conditions. Name them. First, we take things slowly physically. I need time to adjust to being married before we worry about other aspects of the relationship. That's completely reasonable, Jake agreed. Second, if either of us decides this isn't working after a year, we figure out how to end it amicably without destroying the ranch or hurting the people who depend on it. I can live with that, though I don't think it will be necessary. And, third, we have a real wedding. Not some courthouse ceremony, but something with our friends and family present. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. Jake's smile widened. I'd like that. Maria would never forgive us if we didn't give her a chance to plan a proper celebration. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Maria appeared in the doorway. Did I hear someone mention a wedding? Sarah blushed, but Jake laughed. Sarah's agreed to marry me. Finally! Maria exclaimed, throwing her arms around both of them. I was beginning to think you two were never going to stop dancing around each other. You knew this was going to happen? Sarah asked. I hoped it would happen, Maria corrected. You're good for each other. Jake hasn't been this happy since before his father died, and you found your place here in a way that goes beyond just doing a job. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. They decided on a simple ceremony to be held at the ranch in early October, when the weather would be perfect and the fall colors at their peak. Maria took charge of most of the planning with obvious enthusiasm, while Jake and Sarah continued their daily work routines. The other ranch hands reacted to the engagement news with universal approval. Tom Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside one afternoon to tell her that Jake was a lucky man and that he was glad she was joining the family permanently. Miguel and Carlos offered to help with wedding preparations, and even the part-time workers who only came during busy season seemed pleased by the announcement. As the wedding date approached, Sarah found herself feeling surprisingly calm about the decision. She and Jake had developed an easy companionship that felt comfortable and natural. They discussed ranch business as equals, shared meals and conversation, and had begun spending their evenings together reading or planning improvements to the property. The physical side of their relationship was progressing slowly but naturally. Jake was patient and respectful, never pushing for more than Sarah was ready to give. Their first kiss happened 3 weeks after their engagement, during a quiet moment after they had successfully delivered a difficult calf. It was soft and sweet, without the desperate passion Sarah had experienced with previous boyfriends, but with a warmth that felt like it could grow into something deeper over time. "Are you nervous?" Jennifer asked during a phone call 2 days before the wedding. She had agreed to be Sarah's maid of honor despite her ongoing skepticism about the marriage. Surprisingly, no, Sarah said truthfully. "I feel like I'm making the right decision." "What changed your mind?" "When we talked 3 months ago, you were completely uncertain. I got to know him," Sarah explained. "Not just the public version of Jake Morrison, but the real person. He's kind, reliable, and genuinely cares about building a good life here. I think we can be happy together." "And you love him?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I don't know if what I feel is love in the traditional sense, but I care about him deeply, and that feeling is growing stronger over time." "Maybe that's enough to start with." The wedding day dawned clear and cool, perfect autumn weather with brilliant blue skies and trees dressed in gold and crimson. The ceremony was held on the front lawn of the main house, with wildflowers picked from the ranch's pastures decorating a simple wooden arch that Jake and Miguel had built the week before. Sarah wore a simple white dress that Maria had helped her choose, and Jake wore his best suit with a bolo tie that had belonged to his father. The guest list was small but meaningful: ranch employees, neighbors, a few friends from town, and Jake's cousin from Colorado who served as best man. The ceremony itself was brief and heartfelt. They had written their own vows, focusing on partnership, mutual respect, and their shared commitment to the ranch and each other. When the local minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jake's kiss was gentle but confident, and Sarah felt a surge of warmth and contentment that surprised her with its intensity. The reception was held in the barn, which had been decorated with hay bales, autumn leaves, and strings of lights. Maria had prepared a feast that included everyone's favorite foods, and there was dancing to music provided by a local country band. Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the celebration, surrounded by people who had become important to her over the past few months. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Sarah and Jake found themselves alone on the front porch where he had proposed 3 months earlier. Sarah was still wearing her wedding dress, but she had kicked off her shoes and was sitting on the porch swing with her feet tucked under her. "How do you feel, Mrs. Morrison?" Jake asked, settling beside her on the swing. "Different," Sarah said, considering the question seriously. "But, good different. Like I've finally found where I belong." "No regrets?" "None." "You?" "None," Jake said firmly. "Though I have to admit, I was nervous this morning. Not about marrying you, but about whether I'd be able to make you happy." "You already have made me happy," Sarah said, leaning against his shoulder. "This place, this life, it's all more than I ever expected to have." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars appear in the clear sky above the ranch. The sounds of horses moving in the pastures and the distant lowing of cattle provided a peaceful backdrop to the evening. "What happens now?" Sarah asked eventually. "Now we build a life together," Jake said simply. "We take it one day at a time and see what develops. There's no rush to figure everything out immediately." "I love that about you," Sarah said, surprising herself with the admission. "You're so patient and steady. It makes me feel safe." Jake turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I love your courage," he said. "It took incredible bravery to take this chance, to trust me with your future. I don't take that responsibility lightly." As they finally headed inside to begin their new life as a married couple, Sarah realized that Maria had been right about love coming in different forms. What she felt for Jake might not be the passionate romance she had once dreamed of, but it was something deeper and more stable. It was the foundation for a partnership that could weather whatever challenges the future might bring. 6 months later, as Sarah helped deliver Midnight's foal on a warm spring morning, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that first day when she had come looking for a simple ranch job. She was now a full partner in a thriving business, a respected member of a close-knit community, and the wife of a man who had proven himself worthy of her trust. The foal was a filly, just as Jake had hoped, with Midnight's intelligent eyes and her father's strong build. As they watched the newborn horse take her first wobbly steps, Jake slipped his arm around Sarah's waist in a gesture that had become natural and comforting. "What should we name her?" he asked. "Hope," Sarah said without hesitation. "Her name should be Hope." Jake smiled and kissed the top of his wife's head. "Perfect. Hope it is." As they stood together in the barn, watching new life take its first steps into the world, Sarah knew that she had made the right choice. Her marriage to Jake Morrison had begun as a practical arrangement, but it had grown into something much more meaningful. They had built a partnership based on trust, respect, and shared dreams, and Sarah was confident that love would continue to grow between them as the years passed. The ranch stretched out around them, for generations of Morrison family legacy that would now continue for another generation. Sarah Martinez Morrison had found more than just a job when she answered that newspaper ad. She had found a home, a purpose, and a future filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes taking a leap of faith led to exactly where you were meant to be. For Sarah, that place was Red Rock Ranch, standing beside the man who had offered her not just a job, but a chance to become part of something lasting and meaningful. The future stretched ahead of them like the wide-open pastures of the ranch, full of promise and potential. Whatever challenges might come, they would face them together, as partners in every sense of the word. And that, Sarah realized, was exactly the kind of love story she had been waiting for all along. Sarah's alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 in the morning, an hour earlier than she usually woke up for her diner job. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts about Jake Morrison's unusual proposition. Now, sitting on the edge of her bed in her small apartment, she wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. But she had committed to the trial day, and Sarah Martinez was not someone who went back on her word. She pulled on her oldest jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, and the work boots she had worn during summers at her grandfather's farm. They were scuffed and worn but still serviceable. The drive to Red Rock Ranch took 25 minutes in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah arrived to find the parking area already busy with pickup trucks and the sound of men's voices calling to each other across the barnyard. Lights were on in the main house and several of the outbuildings. "You're early," Jake's voice came from behind her as she got out of her car. "That's a good sign." Sarah turned to see him approaching with 2 steaming coffee cups. He handed her one, and she accepted it gratefully. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed to chase away the last remnants of sleepiness. "Thank you. I wasn't sure what to expect for my first day." "We'll start you off easy," Jake said. "Feeding and watering the horses, then cleaning stalls. It's not glamorous work, but it's essential, and it will give you a chance to get comfortable around the animals." They walked toward the horse barn, where Sarah could already hear the sounds of horses moving around and nickering softly. The smell of hay and leather filled the air, and she found it oddly comforting. "Before we go in," Jake said, stopping just outside the barn door, "I want to apologize for yesterday. I should have been more upfront about the marriage situation when you first called. It wasn't fair to spring it on you like that." Sarah studied his face in the dim light from the barn. He looked genuinely sorry, and she appreciated the apology. "I understand why you did it. It's not exactly the kind of thing you can explain over the phone. Still, I could have handled it better. If you decide this isn't for you, I'll understand completely." They entered the barn, and Jake introduced Sarah to Tom Rodriguez, the head horseman. Tom was in his 50s, with weathered hands and a quiet manner that the horses clearly trusted. He showed Sarah how to measure out the proper amounts of feed for each animal and explained their individual dietary needs. "Midnight gets an extra scoop of oats because she's pregnant," Tom explained as they reached the black mare's stall. "Due in about 3 months. Jake's hoping for a filly." Sarah glanced at Jake, who was working 2 stalls down with obvious skill and efficiency. "It must be exciting, having a foal on the way." "First one since his father died," Tom said quietly. "Midnight hasn't been bred in over 4 years." Jake finally decided it was time to start rebuilding the bloodline. The work was physically demanding but not overwhelming. Sarah found herself falling into a rhythm, carrying heavy buckets of water and feed, mucking out stalls, and gradually getting acquainted with each horse's personality. By the time they finished with the morning feeding, she was sweating despite the cool air. "Coffee break," Jake announced, leading the way to a small office area in the barn. "Then, we'll check on the cattle." The office was clearly Jake's domain, with ranch records, veterinary supplies, and photographs of prize-winning animals covering every available surface. Sarah noticed a framed photo of an older man who looked like Jake, standing next to a magnificent bull. "That's my father with Thunder, our best breeding bull," Jake said, following her gaze. "Thunder's getting old now, but he's sired more successful calves than any other bull in the county." "You look a lot like your father," Sarah observed. "That's what everyone says." "I hope I inherited more than just his looks." Jake poured fresh coffee from a thermos and handed her a cup. "He had a way with animals that I'm still trying to match." Tom joined them for coffee, along with two other ranch hands who had been working in different parts of the property. Both men were polite to Sarah, but she could sense them evaluating her, trying to determine whether she would fit in with their established team. "Sarah's thinking about taking the ranch hand position," Jake explained. "You ever worked cattle before?" asked Miguel Santos, Maria's nephew. He was younger than Tom, probably in his 30s, with an easy smile and calloused hands. "Not really," Sarah admitted. "I helped my grandfather with his small herd, but nothing on this scale." "Cattle are easier than horses in some ways," Miguel said. "They're not as smart, but they're a lot bigger. You have to respect their size and remember that they can hurt you without meaning to. The key is staying calm," added Carlos Jimenez, the third man. "Animals can sense fear and nervousness. If you're confident and consistent, they'll usually cooperate." After the coffee break, Jake took Sarah out to the cattle pens. Red Rock Ranch kept approximately 500 head of cattle, a mixture of breeding stock and animals being raised for market. The sight of so many large animals in one place was initially intimidating, but Sarah quickly realized that they were actually quite docile. "We'll be moving this group to the south pasture today," Jake explained, pointing to about 50 head of cattle in one of the pens. "It's good timing for you to see how we handle them." The process of moving cattle from one location to another was more complex than Sarah had expected. It required coordination between several riders on horseback and workers on foot, all moving in carefully orchestrated patterns to guide the animals in the right direction without causing panic or confusion. Sarah was assigned to work the gate, opening and closing it at precisely the right moments to control the flow of cattle. It seemed simple enough, but she quickly learned that timing was crucial. Open the gate too early, and the cattle would scatter in the wrong direction. Open it too late, and they would bunch up and become agitated. "Good job," Jake called out after they had successfully moved the entire herd to their new location. "You're getting the hang of it." The praise felt surprisingly good. Sarah realized that she was enjoying the work more than she had expected. There was something satisfying about working with animals and being part of a team that functioned so smoothly together. Lunch was served at long tables in the main house's spacious kitchen. Maria had prepared a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and vegetables from her garden. All the ranch hands ate together, and the conversation was lively and friendly. Sarah found herself relaxing and beginning to feel like she might actually fit in with this group. "So what do you think so far?" Tom asked as they finished eating. "It's harder work than I expected, but I like it," Sarah said honestly. "Everyone's been very patient with me." "Jake's a good boss," Miguel said. "Fair but demanding. He won't ask you to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Sometimes he works too hard," Carlos added with a grin. "Maria has to practically force him to take time off." Speaking of which, Maria interjected from where she was clearing dishes, "When was the last time you took a full day off, Jake Morrison?" Jake looked sheepish. "I don't know. A few weeks ago?" "Try 2 months ago," Maria corrected. "You're going to burn yourself out if you keep this up." Sarah glanced at Jake, noting the tiredness around his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. Running a ranch this size was clearly a massive responsibility, and he seemed to take it very seriously. The afternoon was spent learning about equipment maintenance and ranch bookkeeping. Jake showed Sarah how to operate the tractors and other machinery, emphasizing safety procedures and proper maintenance routines. Then, he took her to his office in the main house to explain the business side of ranching. "A lot of people think ranching is just about working with animals," Jake said, spreading financial records across his desk. "But it's really about managing a complex business with multiple revenue streams and constantly changing market conditions." The numbers were impressive. Red Rock Ranch generated substantial income from cattle sales, horseboarding, and breeding services. But Sarah could also see the significant expenses involved in maintaining such a large operation. "The profit margins are smaller than most people realize," Jake explained. "One bad year of drought or disease can wipe out several years of good profits. That's why my father was so concerned about having family ownership. He wanted someone who would make decisions based on long-term success, not just immediate returns." "What happens if you can't find someone to marry?" Sarah asked. "Would your cousin really pay a fair price for the ranch?" Jake's expression darkened. "Bobby Morrison is a real estate developer who sees this property as prime land for a shopping mall or housing development. He'd pay enough to satisfy the legal requirements of the will, then sell everything to the highest bidder. For generations of work would be gone within a year." The thought clearly pained him, and Sarah found herself feeling sympathetic to his situation. It seemed unfair that such an important decision should be forced on him by his father's will. "Why did your father include that clause?" she asked gently. "He believed that ranching was a family business that required total commitment from both partners," Jake said. "He watched too many neighboring ranches fail because one spouse wasn't fully invested in making it work. In his mind, marriage was a guarantee of shared goals and mutual support." "But what about love? Surely he didn't expect you to marry someone you couldn't care about?" Jake was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun. "My parents had what he called a practical marriage. They met at a cattle auction, got married 6 months later, and built this ranch together over 30 years. He always said that love was something that grew over time when two people worked toward common goals." "Were they happy?" "I think so. They certainly seemed to understand each other and work well together. I never heard them argue about anything important, and they always presented a united front when dealing with ranch business." Sarah tried to imagine what such a marriage would be like. It sounded stable and sensible, but also lacking in romance and passion. "What if we got married and then realized we couldn't stand each other?" "Then we'd have to figure out how to make it work anyway," Jake said simply. "Divorce wouldn't be an option if I want to keep the ranch. The will is very clear about that." The finality of his statement was sobering. Sarah realized that she would essentially be committing to a lifetime partnership with someone she barely knew, based on nothing more than mutual respect and shared goals. It was an enormous leap of faith for both of them. The afternoon's work concluded with checking on the pregnant Mares and ensuring that all the horses were settled for the evening. Sarah was tired but satisfied as they finished the last of the daily chores. She had survived her first full day of ranch work without any major disasters, and she was beginning to understand what her life would be like if she took the job. "You did well today," Jake said as they walked back toward the parking area. "Better than I expected for someone with limited experience." "Thank you. It was harder than I thought it would be, but I enjoyed it more than I expected to." "Have you given any more thought to the marriage question?" Sarah hesitated. She had been thinking about little else all day, but she still didn't have a clear answer. "I'm still processing everything. It's a lot to consider." "I know it is. Take all the time you need. The job offer stands either way." As Sarah drove home that evening, her body ached from the physical labor, but her mind felt clearer than it had in months. She had spent the day doing meaningful work alongside people who seemed to genuinely care about what they were doing. It was a far cry from her mind-numbing job at the diner, where she spent 8 hours a day serving coffee and pretending to smile at customers who barely acknowledged her existence. But the marriage proposition remained a huge obstacle. How could she commit to spending her life with someone she had known for less than 2 days? And yet, the alternative was to return to her current life of financial struggle and limited opportunities. That evening, Sarah called her best friend Jennifer, who lived in the next town over. Jennifer was a practical woman who worked as a nurse and had always given Sarah good advice about important decisions. "Let me get this straight," Jennifer said after Sarah had explained the situation. "This guy is offering you a job, a place to live, and financial security, but only if you marry him?" "That's the simplified version, but yes." "And you've known him for exactly 2 days?" "Yes." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Okay, this is either the craziest thing I've ever heard, or it's actually brilliant. Tell me about him. What's he like as a person?" Sarah found herself describing Jake in detail, from his obvious dedication to the ranch to his respectful treatment of his employees. She talked about his relationship with his Aunt Maria, his concern for the pregnant horses, and the way he had taken time to teach her new skills without making her feel incompetent. "He sounds like a decent guy," Jennifer said when Sarah finished. "But that doesn't mean you should marry him. What does your gut tell you?" "That's just it," Sarah admitted. "My gut is completely confused. Part of me thinks it's insane to even consider it. But another part of me wonders if this might be the opportunity I've been waiting for." "What opportunity? To get married?" "No, to build a real life. To be part of something important and stable. To have security and purpose instead of just barely getting by from paycheck to paycheck." Jennifer sighed. "I can understand the appeal, Sarah. Your life hasn't been easy since your grandfather died. But marriage is supposed to be about love and companionship, not just financial security." "Is it, though?" Sarah asked. "Look around at all the divorces happening between people who supposedly married for love. Maybe Jake's father had a point about practical marriages being more stable. Maybe, but what about your own happiness? What about finding someone you actually want to spend your life with?" It was a fair question, and Sarah didn't have a good answer. She had dated several men over the years, but none of those relationships had led to anything serious. At 26, she was beginning to wonder if the kind of passionate love she read about in books was just a fantasy that rarely existed in real life. "I need to see him again," Sarah said finally. "Spend more time around him and try to get a better sense of who he really is." "That sounds smart. Just promise me you won't make any major decisions without really thinking them through." "I promise." After ending the call, Sarah sat in her small apartment thinking about her conversation with Jennifer. Her friend's concerns were valid, but they didn't address the fundamental reality of Sarah's situation. She needed to make a change in her life, and this might be her best opportunity to do so. The next morning, Sarah woke with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. She had made her decision about the immediate future, even if the longer-term questions remained unanswered. She picked up her phone and called Jake. "I'd like to take the job," she said when he answered. "The ranch hand position, I mean. I need more time to think about the other part." "That's fair," Jake said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. "When can you start? Is Monday too soon?" "Monday is perfect. Come by Sunday afternoon and we'll get your living arrangements sorted out and go over some paperwork." "Thank you, Jake. I won't let you down. I know you won't." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt both excited and terrified. She was about to make a major change in her life, moving to a new place and starting a challenging new job. The marriage question still loomed in the background, but, for now, she was focusing on the immediate future. She spent the weekend giving notice at the diner, packing her belongings, and trying to prepare herself mentally for what lay ahead. Sunday afternoon, she arrived at Red Rock Ranch with her car loaded with everything she owned, ready to begin the next chapter of her life. Whether the chapter would include marriage to Jake Morrison remained to be seen, but Sarah was finally taking control of her destiny instead of just letting life happen to her. It felt both liberating and frightening, but she knew it was the right decision for now. The future was uncertain, but, for the first time in years, Sarah felt hopeful about what it might bring. She was embarking on an adventure that would test her in ways she had never imagined, and she was determined to meet those challenges head-on. Sarah Martinez pressed her worn sneakers against the truck's brake pedal as she pulled into the dusty parking lot of Red Rock Ranch. The morning sun beat down on the cracked windshield of her 15-year-old Honda, creating patterns of light that danced across the steering wheel. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, smoothing down her dark hair that she had carefully braided earlier that morning. The classified ad in the local newspaper had been simple enough. Ranch hand needed. Experience preferred but will train right person. Good pay, housing included. Call Jake Morrison. Sarah had called 3 times before someone finally answered. The voice on the other end was deep, gruff, and to the point. Can you be here tomorrow at 8? Now, sitting in her car outside the ranch's main gate, Sarah wondered if she was making a mistake. She had never worked on a ranch before, but she needed this job desperately. Her savings account had exactly $43, her rent was due in 2 weeks, and her part-time job at the diner barely covered her groceries. The ranch job offered full-time work and a place to live. It seemed too good to be true. Sarah grabbed her small backpack from the passenger seat and stepped out of the car. The smell of hay and horses filled her nostrils immediately. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing in green pastures that stretched for miles. The ranch house was impressive, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide front porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Several barns and outbuildings dotted the property, and she could hear the sound of horses whinnying somewhere nearby. As she walked toward the main house, Sarah noticed a man working near one of the barns. He was tall, wearing worn jeans and a check shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His cowboy hat shaded his face, but she could see he was watching her approach. This had to be Jake Morrison, the ranch owner she had spoken to on the phone. "You must be Sarah," he called out as she got closer. His voice matched the one from the phone call, deep and confident. "Right on time. I like that." Sarah nodded and walked over to where he stood. Up close, she could see that Jake Morrison was probably in his early 30s, with sun-weathered skin and the kind of muscles that came from years of physical work. His eyes were a startling blue, and when he smiled, she noticed a small scar running along his jawline. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Morrison," Sarah said, extending her hand for a handshake. "I'm really interested in this job." Jake shook her hand, his grip firm and calloused. "Call me Jake. And I have to be honest with you, Sarah. This job isn't easy. We're talking about 12-hour days, 7 days a week during busy seasons. You'll be working with cattle, horses, and equipment that can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. The pay is good, but you'll earn every penny." Sarah nodded seriously. "I understand. I'm not afraid of hard work. I grew up helping my grandfather on his small farm before he passed away. I know how to handle animals, and I learn quickly." Jake studied her for a moment, his blue eyes taking in her slight frame and soft hands. "Tell me why you want this job. And don't give me some story about loving nature or finding yourself. I need someone who's here for the right reasons." The directness of his question caught Sarah off guard, but she appreciated his honesty. "I need the work," she said simply. "I'm behind on my bills, and I can't find anything else that pays enough to live on. I know I don't look like much, but I'm stronger than I appear, and I'll work harder than anyone else you could hire." Something in her tone seemed to satisfy Jake. "The job comes with room and board. There's a small apartment above the barn that the last ranch hand used. It's not fancy, but it's clean and private. 3 meals a day with the family, and we provide work clothes and boots. Starting pay is $40,000 a year, plus bonuses during good seasons." Sarah's eyes widened. $40,000 was more than she had ever made in a year. "That sounds very generous." "It is," Jake agreed. "But there's something else we need to discuss." He leaned against the fence post, his expression becoming more serious. "This ranch has been in my family for 4 generations. My grandfather built it from nothing, and my father expanded it into what it is today. When he died 2 years ago, he left it to me with one condition." Sarah waited, sensing that whatever came next was important. I have to be married within 5 years of inheriting, or the ranch goes to my cousin Bobby in Texas. My father believed that a ranch this size needed a family to run it properly, not just one person. Jake's jaw tightened as he spoke. I've got 3 years left, and, so far, I haven't found anyone willing to take on this kind of life. Sarah wasn't sure why he was telling her this personal information, but she listened carefully. The truth is, Sarah, I need more than just a ranch hand. I need someone who understands what this place means and who's willing to help me keep it in the family. The woman who takes this job won't just be an employee. If things work out between us, she'll need to become my wife. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at Jake, certain she had misunderstood. I'm sorry, what? I'm offering you a job, but with conditions, Jake said calmly. Work here for 6 months. Learn the ranch, learn about me, let me learn about you. If at the end of that time we both think it could work, we get married. You become a full partner in everything here, not just an employee. Sarah felt her face burning. Mr. Morrison, I came here looking for work, not a husband. I don't even know you. I know how it sounds, Jake said. But think about it practically. You need security, and I need to save my family's ranch. We could help each other. I'm not talking about love at first sight or some fairy tale romance. I'm talking about a partnership between two people who have compatible goals. Sarah shook her head, backing away from the fence. This is crazy. You can't just marry someone because you need to inherit a ranch. What kind of marriage would that be? An honest one, Jake replied. I've seen plenty of marriages that started with grand declarations of love and ended in divorce courts. At least we'd both know exactly what we were getting into. No false promises, no unrealistic expectations. And what if I said no to the marriage part but still wanted the job? Jake shrugged. Then I'd probably hire you anyway, because I do need the help. But I'd keep looking for someone who was willing to consider the full arrangement. And when I found her, your job would probably end. Sarah felt trapped. The job was exactly what she needed, but the marriage condition was completely unexpected. How do I know you're not some kind of predator who lures women out here with job offers? You could call the sheriff's office and ask about me, Jake suggested. Or talk to any of the business owners in town. I've lived here my whole life. People know me. I'm not perfect, but I'm not dangerous. This is insane, Sarah muttered, more to herself than to him. Maybe, Jake admitted. But desperate times call for creative solutions. Look, you don't have to decide right now. Why don't you let me show you around the ranch? Meet the other workers, see the living quarters, get a feel for what the job would actually involve. Then, you can make an informed decision. Despite every rational instinct telling her to get back in her car and drive away, Sarah found herself nodding. Okay. Show me around. But I'm not promising anything. Jake smiled for the first time since their conversation had taken this strange turn. Fair enough. Let's start with the horses. They walked toward the largest barn, passing several ranch hands who nodded respectfully to Jake. Sarah noticed that the men seemed comfortable around their boss, joking with him and asking questions about various tasks. It wasn't the atmosphere she would have expected if Jake Morrison were the controlling type. Inside the barn, Sarah was impressed by how clean and well-organized everything was. The horses were beautiful animals, clearly well cared for and healthy. Jake introduced her to each one, explaining their personalities and quirks with obvious affection. This is Midnight, he said, stopping at a stall containing a black mare with intelligent eyes. She's the smartest horse I've ever known, but she's also stubborn as a mule. She'll test you constantly, but once she decides you're okay, she'll do anything for you. Sarah reached out carefully to pet Midnight's neck. The horse sniffed her hand, then allowed the contact. She's beautiful. She was my father's favorite, Jake said quietly. He always said that horses were the best judges of character. Midnight liked him immediately, but it took her 3 months to warm up to me after he died. Sarah heard the pain in his voice and glanced at him. You were close to your father? Very close. He taught me everything about running this ranch. When he got sick, I came back from college to help take care of things. I was supposed to finish my business degree, but the ranch needed me more than I needed a diploma. What would you have done if you had finished college? Jake leaned against the stall door, considering the question. Probably would have ended up back here anyway. This place is in my blood. I can't imagine living anywhere else or doing anything else. They continued the tour, visiting the cattle pens, the equipment sheds, and the fields where hay was grown to feed the animals through the winter. Sarah was impressed by the scope of the operation. This wasn't a hobby farm or a weekend retreat. Red Rock Ranch was a serious business that employed 12 full-time workers and generated substantial revenue from cattle sales and boarding horses for other ranchers. The apartment is this way, Jake said, leading her to a wooden staircase on the outside of one of the barns. The previous tenant kept it pretty clean. The apartment was small but comfortable, with a main room that served as both living room and kitchen, a separate bedroom, and a full bathroom. Large windows faced east and west, providing plenty of natural light. The furniture was simple but functional, and everything was spotlessly clean. The previous ranch hand lived here for 8 years, Jake explained. He only left because his wife inherited a farm in Oklahoma, and they decided to move closer to her family. He was a good worker and a good man. Why didn't he consider your marriage arrangement? Sarah asked, then immediately felt foolish for the question. Jake laughed. Because he was already married, and I'm not interested in men. Though I appreciate your assumption that I might be desperate enough to consider it. Sarah felt her cheeks redden. I didn't mean. I know what you meant. And, to answer your unspoken question, no, I haven't propositioned every woman who's applied for work here. You're the first person I've made this offer to, and you'll probably be the last. If you turn me down, I'll just have to find another way to deal with my father's will. What other way? Jake shrugged. Sell the ranch to my cousin Bobby for whatever he's willing to pay, which won't be much. Or find some other woman willing to enter into a business arrangement disguised as marriage. Neither option appeals to me much. They walked back down the stairs and continued toward the main house. I'd like you to meet my Aunt Maria, Jake said. She's been the housekeeper here since before I was born. She knew my father's conditions for the will, and she understands why I'm doing things this way. The main house was even more impressive inside than out. The front door opened into a large living room with exposed wooden beams and a stone fireplace that looked like it could heat the entire ground floor. Family photos covered the mantelpiece, showing generations of Morrisons working the ranch and celebrating various milestones. Jake, is that our new ranch hand? Called a voice from the kitchen. A woman in her 60s appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was small and round, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Sarah Martinez, meet Maria Santos, Jake said. Maria, this is Sarah. She's considering taking the job. Maria studied Sarah carefully, but her expression was friendly. Have you told her about your father's crazy will yet, or are you easing into that conversation? We've discussed it, Sarah said, surprised by the woman's directness. And, what do you think? Maria asked. Too crazy to consider, or crazy enough that it might just work? Sarah glanced at Jake, who was watching her reaction carefully. I honestly don't know what to think. It's not exactly what I expected when I answered the job ad. Nothing about this family has ever been conventional, Maria said with a laugh. Jake's grandfather proposed to his grandmother by leaving a note in her mailbox. His father asked his mother to marry him during a cattle auction. The Morrison men aren't known for their romantic gestures. At least I asked in person, Jake pointed out. True, Maria agreed. That's progress. She turned back to Sarah. For what it's worth, Jake is a good man. He works harder than anyone else on this ranch, he treats his employees fairly, and he's never gone back on his word about anything. If he says he'll treat you well, he will. But what kind of marriage would it be? Sarah asked.
I mean, without love or any real emotional connection?
Some of the strongest marriages I've known started with less, Maria said thoughtfully. My own parents' marriage was arranged by their families. They barely knew each other when they got married, but they built a good life together over 40 years.
Love isn't always where you start. Sometimes it's where you end up.
Jake looked uncomfortable with the conversation.
We should probably discuss the practical aspects of the job first. The marriage question can wait until Sarah has a better understanding of what she'd be signing up for.
They spent the next hour going over the daily routines of the ranch. Sarah would be responsible for helping with the horses, maintaining equipment, and assisting with cattle management during busy seasons. The work was physically demanding but not beyond her capabilities, especially with proper training. We start at 5:30 every morning, Jake explained.
Animals need to be fed and watered before the day gets too hot.
Lunch is at noon, and we usually finish up around 6 in the evening, unless there's an emergency or we're dealing with sick animals.
What about time off?
1 full day off per week, usually Sunday unless we're in the middle of calving season or something equally urgent.
2 weeks of vacation per year, and we try to schedule it during slower times. Sarah nodded. The schedule was demanding but not unreasonable. And the other workers? What are they like? Good people, Jake said. Most of them have been here for years.
They'll help you learn the ropes, and they're not the type to cause problems. I don't tolerate harassment or bullying on my ranch. As they walked back outside, Sarah noticed that the sun was getting higher and the day was becoming warmer. Several ranch hands were working with horses in a nearby corral, their movements efficient and practiced. The whole operation had a feeling of competence and stability that was reassuring.
I need time to think about this, Sarah said finally.
The job sounds good, but the marriage condition changes everything.
I understand, Jake said. How much time do you need? A few days, maybe a week. I need to talk to some people, maybe do some research about you and the ranch. That's smart, Jake agreed. Maria wasn't kidding about checking my references. Talk to anyone in town. Call the bank, the feed store, the sheriff's office. I've got nothing to hide. Sarah nodded, feeling slightly more confident about the situation. If I took the job, when would you want me to start? As soon as possible.
We're heading into our busiest season, and I'm already short-handed.
And the marriage timeline? 6 months to get to know each other, like I said.
If things worked out, we could have a simple ceremony before the end of the year. If they didn't work out, you'd still have a job here for as long as you wanted it, assuming you were good at the work.
Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the decision she was facing. This is a lot to process. I know it is. Look, why don't you come back tomorrow and spend a full day working with the crew?
Get a real sense of what the job involves and how you'd fit in with the team.
No commitment, just a trial run. The suggestion made sense. Sarah couldn't make an informed decision without understanding what she'd actually be doing day to day. Okay. What time should I be here? 5:30.
Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty, and bring gloves if you have them.
We'll provide everything else you need.
As Sarah walked back to her car, her mind was spinning with everything that had happened in the past hour. She had come looking for a simple ranch job and instead found herself considering a marriage of convenience to a man she had just met. It was crazy, impractical, and completely unlike anything she had ever imagined doing with her life. But, as she drove away from Red Rock Ranch, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this might be exactly the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for. Not the marriage part, necessarily, but the chance to be part of something bigger than herself, to learn new skills, and to build a more stable life than she had ever known. The question was whether she was brave enough to take such a massive leap of faith, and whether Jake Morrison was really the kind of man who could be trusted with such an important decision. Only time would tell, but tomorrow's trial run would give her more information to work with. As the ranch disappeared in her rearview mirror, Sarah realized that her life was about to change dramatically, one way or another. The only question was whether she would have the courage to embrace the change or retreat to the safety of her familiar but limited existence. The decision would have to be made soon, and Sarah knew that whatever choice she made would affect not just her immediate future, but the entire trajectory of her life. It was both terrifying and exhilarating to have such power over her own destiny, especially when the stakes were so high and the outcome so uncertain.